February, but it's not. We've got another day tomorrow. So we only have one apology today, Clint. So welcome to our travellers back, and hope you're all refreshed and ready to go, hit the ground running. And welcome, Clint. Nice to see you again. Yep. I think your seat's probably still warm from the last time you were here. Welcome. All right, thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Mubeni. Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon, everybody. So today, our long-term plan workshop, we are at workshop 20. We've tried to stay away from the numbers because it just seems like a lot, but we are on the verge of a milestone, our 21, our 21st, and we are leading up to the adoption of our LTP consultation document and supporting information. Today, we are focused on these final pieces. Clint from Audit New Zealand will provide an update about the process that they have undertaken, and we'd also like to check in with you whether there are any further questions you'd like answered before the council meeting next week. So today on our triangle we are in two spaces. First, to know, so that you know and understand the process that audit has undertaken, and then do, as in sharing any final questions with us. And so on that, I will pass over to Clint to provide your update.
Just press that. Thank you, Caroline. Me, Bernie, and councillors, thanks for the opportunity to come this afternoon. Just to talk through, it's quite a new experience for me, and for most auditors, because we're in the situation where we're not issuing an opinion on your consultation document, but we've been doing quite a bit of work on all the underlying information in preparation for issuing an opinion on the LTP that's to follow later in the year. So, I'm not here to give you any assurance, but just to take you through some of the processes and thinking, because in doing that work, in the final LTP, part of our audit report there is to say that council consult appropriately throughout the process. So we have to still look at the consultation document and provide feedback, and it's ultimately up to council to decide what it wishes to do with that. When we look at a consultation document, we'll go back to the Act and says, what does the Act really require to do? And in summary, it says, we apply on whether you're consulting on the right stuff. And the second thing is whether the information in the consultation document is understandable to an informed reader or reader rather. So I'll start with the first one. Is council consulting on the right stuff? The right issues, I shouldn't say stuff. It's not a very technical term there. On the right matters. My view is, and it's always subjective, is yes, you are. If I look at the rates increases, it's a significant, it's a double-digit increase. It matters to people, especially in the current environment. So that's something we expected to see in this consultation. The second thing around the whole solid waste management, and I'll just put it in that you're moving from a single rate to 3 targeted rates. It's a big shift. So again, the right thing. And then the other 2 targeted rates. So it's about the right mix given the context. We would have questioned if you didn't have an LTP amendment last year, we would question why you're not talking about water, because you've had some big changes in that space, but you've done that already. So we wouldn't expect you to repeat it in this round. So, yep, tick the box in that. The second part is a bit more challenging for me, and that's, the access can be readily understood by interested or affected people. And that's where I suppose I have a few comments to make for council to consider. The first one is, council does a 20-year long-term plan, and everyone else does a 10-year long-term plan, or most councils does a 10-year long-term plan. And I question the merits of that, because it does make the document quite a daunting document. You're really guessing. And I say, a lot of the focus here is in the first 3 years of the plan. But beyond that, there's a lot of estimates. And then after 10 years, it even gets more vague. And taking that long-term view, it's what value does it give to the community? Can people really engage beyond 10 years? Can they engage beyond 3 years? I might ask the question. So you've got this document that can be overwhelming to someone picking it up because it's covering 20 years. The second part, I suppose, on the CD that I just wanted to raise is about the length of the document. So I actually did get the latest version. I think it's down to about 40 odd pages now. Just on 40 pages. So is it readable, and can people put things together? Now, given what you're consulting on 3 different rates in solid waste, for example, you're trying to give people as much information as you can. But with that, it can also create some complexity. So, that was my initial reaction. Is it LTP, CD, too long, trying to capture far too much? Now, I just want to say around the 20-year versus 10-year thing, options, is that the infrastructure strategy is a 30-year strategy, and we'd expect to see that, because that's the long-term view of where council wants to take its large assets and plan for it and reflect that. The asset management plan is bringing it down to individual asset categories and talking about a 10-year time frame, looking at aging of assets, age of assets, condition, etc. So those long-term decisions and initiatives sits in this, your infrastructure strategy and your asset management plans and your finance strategy. That's with the long-term thinking, and then it's bringing it back, pairing it back and saying, okay, now for the next 10 years, how do we translate those relevant things into these 10 years? So I like to think of it like that. Strategy, it's the, things on the horizon. The plan is about the here and now, and the here and now in this case is 10 years. So just want to leave you with that thought. Is it, we're not going to qualify your LTP or do anything about it. It's your choice at the end to do that. Sure.
You sound like Councillor Ross Brannigan, who's been advocating for the 10-year LTP for as long as I know. But I guess just a question for you. Like, given that we are a really debt-constrained council, and where our debt is, and also some of those forward-looking infrastructure challenges, I would have thought that actually showing that long-term view over the next 20 years is actually really important to show the peaks and things then trending back to where there's potentially some more comfort. So is that, I guess your point is you can do that without necessarily including the last 10 years in terms of the whole planning, in terms of capital program and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like it is an important part of our story to show where we're going to go and where we're going to end up over that sort of critical 20 years. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, Councillor, I think that's reflected in your strategies already. So you've got it in your finance strategy. You'll have it in your infrastructure strategy. So if you think about bringing that into the CD document, and I've seen some councils put in exactly what you're talking, what the debt profile is going to look like over the 20 or 30 years. This is it. This is what our expenditure is going to look like. And they have 1 or 2 graphs in their CD document that captures that, so it gives people that, and always referring them back to those documents. They're always there for the public to go and read. When it gets to the LTP again, the actual final document, it's referencing back to you, because you talk about your infrastructure strategy there, You talk about your finance strategy that's driven some of those numbers, referencing it back to the, if you want the detail, go and have a look there. But let's not clutter it, because there's a word for it, or a phrase for it. Something baffles brains. So maybe just keep it concise and tight. Yeah. Cheers.
I thought it would just be helpful just to reassure elected members that obviously when we did a 20-year long-term plan, in our last long-term plan, this wasn't a matter raised by Audit, so we've never, up until today, this hasn't been something signalled. And I do, just because I think it's important for councillors to know that prior to Christmas we sent copies of all of the reports and the resolutions that council had passed, which included your decision that this was a 20-year long-term plan, and nothing has been raised by Audit. So while Clint's comments are valid about what does it mean for the reader in terms of how do they stay on top of everything, I think it's also reminding council that this long-term plan is trying to achieve a lot because we have to, but that we're not in a position to change our long-term plan from a 20-year long-term plan to a 10-year long-term plan if we want to adopt our long-term plan next week.
Monique, I remember that conversation around the 20-year, 10-year discussion that we had, and it was pretty much we had no choice. I didn't think that we had to remain with the 20-year plan. And David, you were, because I know I advocated for a 10-year plan, but it ended up being not a discussion or a debate that we could have.
A lot of it was around the conversation about our development contributions. This is a big part of it, to make sure that the full program we need to invest was in the calculation, but also in terms of Councillor Jennings' comment around the debt and showing that we were actually on a good trajectory in terms of bringing it down. Yeah.
Thanks, Clint. I suppose the only comment from me really, what came to my mind as you were talking was actually the alignment of the different strategies, and I appreciated hearing that in terms of a 50-year infrastructure strategy, a 20-year long-term plan strategy, and I suppose in my mind now it's about how do we connect the dots of those other strategies and works that we're undertaking as a council, because I'm a visual guy, and so for me I'm sort of thinking, how do I see that in a diagram? How do I see the correlation? And I appreciate the comments around you don't know what you don't know in 20 years time, and too often it is hypothetical based predictions, whatever it is you want to call it, planning we do. So but that's my only feedback. I am interested about how those different strategies align and where they fit with Audit in that sequencing type of fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to respond to that one, so part of the work that we do is we do look at the infrastructure strategy, the finance strategy, and make sure that what has been said in there washes through into the LTP, into the CD. So that's make it tying up the dots, if you like. So there's a piece of work that we're required to do in terms of our methodology, and the Office of the Auditor General's methodology around the audit of the LTP. And likewise, we also will do that for the CD. If there's anything reflected in the CD, we will go back to those documents and make sure that they all tie up, because while they all stand alone, they should also be able to connect up at some level. Yeah. Chair, I was just saying, wanting to move on to some of the items that's been consulted on. There's options, so you meet those requirements by giving people options, showing them the implications to a large extent. I suppose when diving into the detail, it's asking the question, well, does the reader understand that? So, if I just take the first one, under the rates increase, if we go for an average increase of 23%, it says impact on debt, no impact on debt. So I asked myself, what does that mean? And we had that conversation this morning. So no impact on debt means that debt. So if I think purely as an accountant, balance sheet debt is going to stay like that, so we're never going to pay off debt. Or does it mean we're not going to borrow, have to increase our borrowings, but we'll still be paying the debt? So it's about giving that kind of clarity to the reader rather than, short, sharp. I know, again, we want to keep it short and sharp, but does a reader understand what that means in real terms? In some instances, we talk about a decrease. I think there was, or debt increased by 1.3 million. So does that mean it's the total debt, or does it mean we have to borrow over and above what we need for our capital requirements and some OPEX that we funded, another 1.3 million? So it's that kind of clarity so the readers understand it. And I think that's something that we see as throughout the draft document. I also think, sometimes the language, so again, under the preferred option, some levels of services will be reduced. In fact, you're going to stop in grass. But our community should expect, it's been clear, will expect, because should says, might be a chance I'm still going to get some of these services. So being very clear to the reader is important. There's a whole list of items of services that will be changing. So there was one around the sale of the carbon credits is an example. So what does that mean? We're just going to get cash in? Does it mean, what's the long-term implication? How does that affect the level of service? But it's just those connections so people can, if they ask the question is, what does it mean to me if I read it? It's cold, or cold, if you like. So that was the one, just on the rates. The other one on the solid waste and break-in, and I understand now I haven't gone through it in much detail, but one of the comments we made there was, I'm currently paying a rate of X amount. We're now going to unpack it into 3. So tell me where I stand now and what is it going to look like in the future in a consolidated way. So I get straight first hand, because I'm first concerned about how much is coming out of my pocket before I get into all the other things that's happening. So again, being clear, because it's, the first read on the first version, I want to just make it clear, is that, you're left quite confused here. So am I going from $100 to $500, or am I going from 100 to 105? What's all these different things really saying? So being just very clear up front. You paid this in 23-24. You're going to pay this from 24-25 and 25-26. Once the new contracts kick in, there might be a further charge, so people know what they're buying into.
Ben, I think the intention is to send a letter to each ratepayer that explains the contextualized impact on that particular rating unit, because my concern with doing that in the consultation document is the outcome for different rating units is different, and that's why we're splitting it into the 3, because the problem statement that's included in there is basically that everyone's paying the same amount, and they shouldn't, because people receive different levels of service. So taking the consultation document and then having something that another piece of information, i.e. the letter that provides that quite contextualized information to each ratepayer, does that kind of address some of your thinking like that? Because then they will be able to get that letter and actually go, this is the impact on me.
Yeah, it does. It gives them good information, but again, this is the standalone document. This is what you're asking them to comment on it. And the second thing is that you're talking about a targeted rate. So, yep, it might be applicable for rural people or not. But at the end of the day, is where are you moving from in this document at an overall level? I think is important. I absolutely get, and some councils do that. They have a website where you can plug in your details and it will push up, give you your expected rate. So that all happens in the background, and that's fine. But this is what you're consulting on, and that's what you ask.
May I just quickly say, in relation to the feedback, it might seem as you listen to it that there's a lot of detailed feedback coming your way. Just to flag, in terms of versions, we only received this feedback this morning and haven't got it in written form yet. And some of the feedback has been reflected through many versions that we've already worked through. So hopefully we've met everything. But just to flag that if it seems a bit detailed at this stage, it's because of timing in terms of the versions and when the conversations have happened before being able to come back to you. So just to clarify that.
So we're going to see another version at some stage that removes some of this confusion and all these pros and cons of the different options, which are largely opinion at times.
Yeah, I'm personally grateful for the feedback and the level of detail, because we don't normally get to see or understand that, and to understand, what the team have to work through Audit New Zealand around. So I actually appreciate this. I don't know if we do it every time, but it certainly, for me, helps me connect the dots of the conversations that are occurring. So definitely understand that a lot of this is kind of new today. Kia ora.
So I'm really guided by councillors how much you want me to go on. So if you say stop, I'll stop. I'm happy to do so. I told Jacinta 45 minutes is a long time. I can only take so many body punches. The other one that I just was going to flag is around the landfill provision, right? So there are two parts to it. There's the debt. You've got debt at the end when the landfill was closed that you have to repay and look into rate for it. And I understand that part. The second part is the aftercare cost that goes with that. Now, excuse me for getting a bit technical here on the counting, right? So while the landfill was operating, a provision was being built up, and that's a liability on your balance sheet, and it's probably sitting at about 14 million or thereabout at the end of 30 June 2023. So in accounting terms, what we were doing, we were crediting your liabilities, creating a liability, and debiting the expenses on the income statement. Now, and I haven't gone back that far enough, but if you think of it like that, so you've got all these expenses sitting for running the landfill. You've got employee cost, you've got depreciation, you've got interest cost, and then you would have had this cost for aftercare coming through, and you would expect in those previous years to be rated for that, so that when the eventual closure happens, you've got the money or the provision to pay for that. Now, I just want to say this, is that when you rate like that, so you would have rated year on year for that, and what would have happened is that you'd have built up cash because you haven't incurred the cost yet, you're just keeping it on your balance sheet, so you'd have built up that cash. And what happens in councils, they take that cash and they borrow it to another activity, and then later that activity pays it back, and you do internal loans, effectively is what they call it. We don't audit that, but that money just moves around the system, if you like. And then when it comes time to incur those costs, you just draw down the loans, right? Now, what my understanding is that the aftercare cost was never rated for in the past. And I think my point is that needs to be reflected in the document, so ratepayers understand that, and I think Jacinta agrees that's going to happen. Yeah, So again, it's that level of transparency, because people are going to look and say, now we're asking for $1.4 million of aftercare cost. Didn't anyone think about that when we started this landfill? Is this a new thing? It's not a new thing. It's been there, right? So just being clear around something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've always complained aftercare costs now.
Yep.
Disagreement in a word that is used, and so we'll work through that.
For my own understanding, it's probably not for Clint to answer at all, more so for us, but have we ever had targeted rating around aftercare of any of our other landfills? And I'm particularly thinking about Foxton, where council are undertaking remedial work, and so where do the costs of those types of things sit? And like I said, I know it's probably not an answer now, but I'm just in my mind thinking we're going to rate our district over Levin, but there are other landfills around the district too that have ongoing implications, or not, for this council.
Just probably point of clarification that there is the Foxton one that's referenced closed around about 30 years ago. We've done some recent monitoring on site in conjunction with the work at Levin Landfill while the team was here, and understanding some of the historic data collection. That's all covered through operational costs, and it's pointing towards us not having to signal any significant capital investment in the near term. That has kind of gone through its life cycle, and there's not any significant concerns, and obviously much smaller scale than what we're dealing with at Levin and the challenges associated with aftercare.
Just the last point on the CD document itself, that the option about the removal of the curbside recycling, option 4, and it starts with the first, if you like, disadvantage, I think it's called, is that it's in breach of MFE's service requirements. So if we go ahead with that option, we're breaching it. And I, again, it's council's call to make. My concern with that one is that you're going to consult on something that is potentially, if people come in their droves and say, no, we like that option, you can still veto it, I'm sure. But just the fact that you're putting out there something that is, is not permissible, does worry me. And I know Jacinta and I have a difference of view on this, but in the water, when we did the water stuff as well, we said the law said this. The amendment, the law said this. You were doing that, and what concerns me that as your auditor is around the tone that sets. Is that council's happy to embrace something that goes against a policy or a piece of legislation. Now, I'm pretty sure it doesn't manifest itself into the control environment, but it does worry me. That kind of I don't know what's the word to say. It's accepted might be a bit of a stronger word, but it's reflected in documents like that. Just want to put that on the table as your independent auditor, more than saying this is wrong or right. Is that kind of cultural behavior that council, not management, that council would be accepting of.
So I just need to sort of address this point, because this is consistent with some of the conversation we had around this table before around what is council legally required to do in the solid waste space. My understanding is that we are not legally required to provide a recycling service. There's no obligation, but if we do, we have to provide it in a way that is consistent with the guidelines in order to be able to access and attract the levy funding. So it's so the wording that we've included is around the impact on our ability to attract and access the levy funding rather than the quality or the nature of the service. Have I understood that correctly? Because it sounds like this is just a small wording change in order to clarify that, because from my perspective, that option absolutely is entirely a valid option, and we're not doing anything wrong or that's not permitted. Perhaps it is just a wording clarification. Can someone comment on my understanding and if I've got the right end of the stick?
So we can't, there's nothing in law that says that councils must provide a curbside recycling service. There is guidelines from Ministry for Environment that were released on the 1st of February 2024 that talk about ensuring curbside recycling services are provided to households in urban areas of 1,000 people or more. But it also then talks to the Transforming Recycling consultation that was done back in 2022 and further, we're yet to get further direction about the government's response to the food scrap service and the curbside service.
Sorry, this is getting into the weeds, but so it sounds like this fix is just changing the word to say not in breach of the guidelines, we're just not consistent with the guidelines, because they are ultimately only guidelines. They're not requirements, they're not mandatory, they are advisory in nature.
Yeah,
is that the solution?
We can look at that, and I suppose the context of the statement is and reads as breach of Ministry Environment Service requirements, meaning we lose the MFE levy. So it's not referring to a breach of legislation or anything. It's merely the context that there's a set of standards. If we don't provide it, then we will lose the levy. So the connotation is that there's a negative financial impact of not complying, not necessarily a legal breach of a legal requirement, but the word breach perhaps is what's inferring that it's a legal breach. It's the context of the remainder of that sentence. We could have a really look at that, but yeah.
I would just be happy to remove statements like that from there's a whole lot of green ticks and red crosses, which I think are just opinion at times rather than actual fact. But
I'll lob in the grenade and walk away.
That is a fact, and it's our responsibility to make sure that the ratepayer is aware of that fact. Yeah, isn't that important information that the ratepayer should know about? So I guess my answer to that question would be, what percentage of the service is covered by the levy? In my mind, if it was less than 30%, then it's not significant. But that's just my initial response to whether it has to be included or not.
But just to close it off then, but just to contextualise the option, I get what your point is, Jonathan, but to contextualise the option, can't we just deal with this by just saying something like, we may lose the levy funding? Because I don't know, is it even a certainty that we would? Can we just describe at a high level the potential impact, just so that people go, okay, well, that option, that may be a consequence. We don't know if it is, we don't know if it isn't. End of story.
wouldn't it be easier to reword the slide that says we're in breach of the service requirements to say we would no longer be entitled to the levy funding, or we're likely to no longer be entitled to the levy funding if we don't provide this service. And put the dollar value of the levy funding. Does everyone have that? That seems logical.
So just to highlight, that's what we already have done. So in the version that you see, we have done that.
All right, I'll move on. The other item that in terms of the CDs around capital doability. So our audit work in that space, we took the last 3 years, looked at the budget versus actual, and where council's landed is above our threshold of 75%, because if it's below 75% of spend, then we would be looking to include an emphasis of matter in both the LTP and the CD audit report that we've been issuing one. In this case, we're above the threshold, but we think it's useful to signal to the community again that council's done a few things to make sure that it is able to spend to that level. So it's pulled in better supplier relationships. There's a revamping, and again, not a whole lot of information, short and sharp, just so that you address it and give the community that comfort around spend. Now, if I want to, one of the things that we've done, I'll just jump ahead, around the financial models itself. So the work that we do there is we look at the capital projects that's been proposed, and so there's a theoretical list of projects, if you like, and the council has to apply a haircut to it, right? And that's because either affordability issues or just capacity to spend. So in the first few years, that haircut, if you take the first 10 years of the plan, that difference between theoretical and actual builds up to about $120 million based on the models we have. So the question, we have a couple of questions around that, is how do you catch up on that shortfall? The second thing is then, for the projects that you've gone from the 60 to the 45, I understand that's still been worked through in terms of prioritization, etc. Is how is that been determined in the first instance? So that's the prioritization process. But then it's the ones that have been deferred, when do they actually get done? Or do they just build and get pushed out into year 11, which is what we're seeing at some councils at the moment. So it's trying to tell that story either in the CD or in the final LTP. We think it's quite important that ratepayers know what they get to be, what's going to be executed each year, and that council's held accountable for that. That fits in then with the doability, because doability is part of, so that we've seen a rise in spending. I think it's about 5 million from this year to next year. It's just giving the ratepayers that comfort that we've got the systems and processes in place to deliver on that. So that and capital doability has been a big issue for councils across the country. We continue to push hard for it, that there's some sense and some robustness around it when projects are agreed on, so that what appears in the LTP can actually be delivered and it's realistic and not just a pipe dream. And I think what we've seen here at council is that over the last 3 years, a massive improvement. The fact that you're above 75% in itself is remarkable. It's just giving that added confidence that that trend will continue. And I think Daniel was telling us this morning, for one contract you had more tenderers than you'd ever had, and that's a good indication. It's not telling all of that detail, but just at the very high level. On the infrastructure strategy, some of the work areas there where we thought there could be some improvement is just a better link in between the life cycle approaches. So the infrastructure strategy, that's your 30-year plan. there's a lot of reference to some of the challenges and issues, and it's how are those challenges and issues addressed in the forecast information. So, one example might be aging infrastructure. So you've got aging infrastructure. So how does that then get reflected in the numbers? You're bringing forward projects. Are you pushing it out? Are you looking to get alternative financing? It's just trying to bring that together in your infrastructure strategy on a page so people can read it and get a clear sense of it. The financial models, I think we had some really good engagement with the team on that. The budgeting and the calculating of the rates. I think the models that's been used and the parameters and the controls around that has been really good from our perspective. There's clearly a good understanding of what went into that and people knowing the different parameters and making sure they're being applied. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's not an easy model to follow. Council hasn't been through it. We simply do your head in. But it's really well executed from our perspective. Performance framework stuff. So I've just given to Carolyn this morning just some general comments, and again, we've spoken about this previously about measures. Do people actually understand some of the measures and targets? And I just picked up a few, so the one was, for example, on minimal water loss. And Council rightfully says, the percentage of real water loss from the network as measured by the Standard World Bank Institute banned for leakage. Now, I don't know what that means, unless you know, well done. But it's about trying just to simplify these things. So for me, the measure would be something like, we want less than 20% water loss or whatever. That I can relate to, but band B, tap someone on the shoulder outside and they know what that is. And then there's things about where it's very internally focused, it's around milestones, for example. We're going to develop a plan and we're going to meet 100% of the milestones. Well, if I don't know what those milestones are, how many milestones they are, when were they supposed to be delivered, how will I even know that you've met 100% or 95%? Yep, and you'll say, well, that's what you come and do, Clint. You come and audit these things. But in terms of accountability back to the community, do they know what's incorporated? Was it just one milestone we had to meet this year? And is that the level of service? So it's just asking those questions. And like there's one on increase from previous year. Well, are we happy with a 5% increase, a 10% increase? What does it mean? Is a 1% what we're targeting here? So is that an appropriate target? The measure might be right, but is the target what you're really aiming for? So I won't go into each one of those, but it's just about that clarity and understandability of these targets and measures that becomes important. I think those were the main points I just wanted to raise, and happy to take any further questions.
Great, thank you, Clint. Yeah, so I think while we don't have an audit opinion, it's been quite thorough about the checks that have gone on. So as we look ahead, what we're doing is we are finalising the documents and particularly having taken on board, we're working on the feedback from Clint and also the feedback that you have provided, so thank you for that. and you will receive a further update of the draft consultation document later today so that you can see all the progress that has been made. You'll also receive the draft submission form with all of the questions laid out. So this document, while you won't be adopting it for consultation, we'd value your feedback on it. And if you could please give us any final feedback on the consultation document and the submission form by the end of day Friday, we'd very much appreciate it. Thank you. Today the agenda is going out to the public, and as we come to the end of this workshop and head into the council meeting on the 6th, we wanted to check and to ask whether there were any further questions or matters that you would like to raise before that council meeting where you'll be considering the documents for adoption. Thank you. And then looking ahead as we move into consultation and preparation for events.
Sorry,
Oh.
Hero, I just really wanted to emphasise, because I know that we're going to send out version 75 this afternoon of the consultation document, although it'll be 76 by the time Audit finish with us today. The public agenda will have the consultation document as at where it is today, noting that any feedback we get from you between now and Friday, we will incorporate into version 82, which we'll put on the public website and make sure you've got a copy of by Monday. And so no doubt you'll find something in the consultation document and the public agenda where we've missed a full stop, or you feel like we've not articulated something quite right. But what I would say is that, like, we've had good couple of conversations over the last few weeks. I don't want officers to feel blindsided over the next couple of days by something that could have been raised today or could have been raised the last couple of weeks. And so please, if there's something that needs to be raised today before we press go on that public agenda, all 780 pages of it, ALS, we'd really appreciate the heads up.
I'm happy to just raise one thing, which was just aside with the condensed capital program, particularly over the first 3 years, we had a good conversation last week. And so, apart from Three Waters and apart from roading, I do just want to understand what does the constraint or those capex limits that we're introducing mean for anything that was in the previous LTP across those next 3 years that's no longer there or has been pushed out beyond those 3 years, just for my own understanding, to make sure that there's that when we read the document that there's nothing major that we're pushing out or cancelling that we should sort of front foot in the document. So it's about just getting my own head around that. And so I'm not suggesting we put that in the document itself, but just, is that doable? Because I think clear around Three Waters, clear around roading, but it's just that other stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely, like, we won't have it for the agenda today, but that's definitely something that in advance of next Wednesday we can provide an FYI note out to elected members. I can't think of anything big, but there's a few things which have either been pushed out so far, or we can make sure we highlight that.
I suppose for me, Monique, is there anything already in the air? Because you and your team would have more oversight than us if there was anything out there that is resonating that needs to be locked down, or is there anything in the risk sector that's been elevated because of the process, and even the stuff that Clint's raised today? Is there anything in that you feel like we need to be giving thought to? So that's all. I know it's all still fresh.
It's a very well framed question, Justin. I think that Clint's comments around option 4 of the recycling, while I disagree around the wording, I think his noting that we're consulting on an option which, while we don't know for sure, may at some point in time we could be restricted in what we can actually do with that option, depending on where MFE get to. It's not something like it's just something you should give thought to. But like I've with fresh eyes this morning reread the consultation document, and there's some small changes that we've made just to make sure we're giving particular nod to some what I think are key messages that as elected members you've given us over the last few months. And while it's a chunky document and there's a lot in there, I feel like it does tell the reader, if they are prepared to get through all 44 pages, what some of our big issues are and how they can contribute to some big decisions that council needs to make. The changing environment in terms of our relationship with government is probably something that might not be reflected in there, and that there's stuff that's going to happen over the next few months that we don't quite know the direction, but I think that is something we can support councillors in your conversations through the engagement process. But I might just check whether my team have any other comments.
I was just going to say that what I need to see then for me could simply be a statement to sort of, declare to the community that this is the state of play, and council are always sort of obliged by central government. I think is probably what I was picking up. Is that just a catchment phrase that we have somewhere? That's all, yeah.
But I mean, I can disagree with you a little bit. Monique, and say option 4 and minor rewording, and option 4 is really just a minor issue. If Clint struggles with some of the confusing statements in the document about whether rates are going to go up and down, targeted rates are going to go up and down for an individual, I think that's a much larger issue that your staff have to deal with to provide a bit more clarity in some of the options presented as well, rather than some minor wording issues in one option.
Yeah, just on that option 4, with the information we have of today, and we have tried to articulate in the document, is by 1 July 26, we may be in a position where that option could present a $1.5 million saving, or it might actually remain cost neutral by the, if a decision of council is to roll out mobile recycling centres, and if by chance that levy continues to increase, which current indications are, within the next 12 months, we could be looking at a doubling or trebling of that levy. But it's all ifs and buts. Those aren't the facts. The facts of today is what we've tried to present, but we have indicated that we can't give any level of certainty around what the ups and downs may be in terms of that rates impact if there is through the course of consultation movement in the levy, or post consultation and decision there's all of a sudden a reversal in our requirements to provide it. We've tried to articulate that as best we can, but it's certainly quite difficult to do so with all the variables and the facts that could change over time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about one option or another at this stage, but I think Clint raised a good point, and I went through the document and looked at all the information presented and all the options and tried to work out from an individual point of view what options would increase my rates by what. It was confusing and hard to do. And we've got spreadsheets and tables of various case exemplars and things as well. And it was very hard to work through the document and say, if I pick this option, this is how it affects me.
Well, and this is what's challenging about a rating instrument, right? Is that what would affect you will be quite different to what will affect Paul, to what will affect Rogan, even though you might all live rurally, because it depends on the rating mechanisms. But certainly if you've got any concerns about specific sentences or phrases that you think are confusing, please be specific and we will respond. We will make sure we address that.
Cara, very minor
very minor thing, but on page 43, Mayor and councillors, I'm a pretty generous guy, but I'm not too keen on receiving Paul's emails. That's been picked up already. Excellent, I thought it might have been.
And your phone number.
I'm just wanting to, because it sounds like we need to get whatever else out now before it's too late. The significance and engagement policy, I got the answers to all my questions, and there was just one probably outstanding point that I'd like to raise here, and that is what is considered significant. And in the table, it says a financial transaction with a value of greater than 10% of rates revenue in the year of that decision, which is $6.2 million. So I kind of feel like something of 5 million, more than 6. I mean, really, do we make a transaction? Million, so it would be a rare thing, but at the same time, I think if it was that high, we would have got a bit of a heads up. So I'm just signalling that I'd like to look at a range of 5 to 10% of rates revenue as considered significant under that. Or is that, can you add that, or what's the appetite?
I think if there's an appetite around the table, like I support that, Councillor Tukapoa, particularly given the significance of engagement policy is not a black and white thing. Like, we look at it within the context, right? And so 5% within a context of a high risk decision or high public interest or cultural values, that's going to lean council more into this triggers significance versus you might have a 6% that is low public interest, low, no one cares, and therefore it might not trigger significance. So I think the team can make those changes to the documents.
Can you put on the mic just a couple of people whether to support that and it's not just me?
Aye.
Yeah.
Support.
Sorry, can I just get some clarity? That doesn't mean we have to do it, does it? It just means we've got the option and flexibility to do it. Then, yeah, that's right. I don't want us to be hard and fast in terms of, yeah.
Does anyone? The only other thing I just wanted to flag that still has a level of discomfort is the inclusion of the it's not actually the inclusion. We've got the dog parent included in the capital program for year 2, but there was some further through the earlier workshops. There was some discussion and around wanting some further work around investigating a wider range of options rather than just replacing the asset. And so, just wanted to make sure that that's captured. That we're not just saying that that's the one solution, therefore there's a budget, that's the solution. So I know that there needs to be financial provision for it, but somehow just making sure that it's clear that that's still an unresolved item.
We probably won't be able to update it in the documentation that comes out this afternoon, just because I'm conscious that Alice and Grace's computer might actually die with all of the documents being uploaded. But what we could do is make sure that next Wednesday that's noted. And in my head, what I'm thinking is we just add the word provision, so it's not a pound; it's the provision of pound facility. Yeah.
So just in terms of next steps, we just need to make sure those who have not yet done so have attached their name in terms of availability. You're probably going to mention that, but I thought I'd jump in just in case. Yeah.
Yes, while this is all going on, Ian and Lisa are looking at the consultation events as well, and yeah, we'd be very grateful if you could continue to fill out that sheet. Thank you. Were there any other comments? Otherwise, I'll go to that last bullet point and linked to consultation, that in order for to ensure that you have all the information needed and perhaps some opportunities to answer some of the tricky questions, proposing to have an elected member workshop or bootcamp perhaps in preparation for the LTP consultation process. We can work through all of this and make sure that you've got everything that you need. And so the 13th of March looked like a date that may suit. And so we're working towards that as well. Great.
So this is rounding off consultation document, so any last request by Friday. Just a real easy fix I'd like to see is where it's got impact on debt on various pages, it's there's inconsistency. Sometimes it says no change to debt, or sometimes it says no impact to debt. If it could just say the same thing, I'd prefer no change rather than no impact, no change to debt levels here.
I think we've fixed that today, but we will triple check.
Kia ora everyone, thank you for having me. I'm doing the policy, strategy and bylaw plan review. Perfect. So as part of the CEO's KPIs in the council plan on page, I assisted the strategic planning team and conducted an overview of the current documents within HDC. And so the purpose of today was to provide you with a view of the documents and to give you a awareness of where the priorities and timeframes are at. And I was just hoping to seek some confirmation or feedback or any suggested changes you may have with the priorities and timeframes. This is in your portal. Yes, so this should be in your portal as the pre-reading with the table and stuff. Awesome, so we're in the do phase of the triangle and I'm just hoping to seek feedback and questions today. Perfect, so we identified that there are 14 documents currently being reviewed within council. These do not include the LTP related ones. So there's 7 external facing, which are the council endorsed documents, and 7 internal, which are ELT endorsed. And then an extra 23 documents to be reviewed this year as well. This is including the documents that are scheduled and not scheduled to be reviewed yet. We've also made a note that the documents under the parks and property are for discussion and allocation once their team's fully staffed, which will be in March this year. Awesome, so here's all the external documents that are council endorsed that are currently in progress of review. We have the Foxton Futures Community Plan as one of them. The Open Space Strategy, that's a partial update just to include live-in with the live-in structure plan. And then I've also included the WMMP as part of this as well, this list. Awesome, and here is the external documents Council endorsed as scheduled for this year. So we have the Public Places Bylaw, so that will include beach access as well. And then we have the bottom four, the solid waste, trade waste, water supply and wastewater. These will be prepared at the same time, and the stormwater bylaw will also be created alongside these. And these are the external documents that need to be reviewed, but just don't have a set schedule. They are on the radar, just haven't got a date set in stone yet. Perfect, and we then identified that there are 4 documents that need to be created. So we've got 2 policies and 2 bylaws. Finance have already begun drafting the asset management policy, and then as said before, stormwater is due to start in about June this year. Awesome, so that's all for today. I was just wondering, is there any questions around today's presentation or any changes you'd like to see?
Yeah. Hi. So the Freedom Camping one, I was wondering whether that, along with the smoke-free and vape-free policy, could be reflected or feed into the Public Places Bylaw, that being recognising or prohibiting smoking in that around playgrounds, parks, and then because I think there was requests from community about a bit more signage for that. Sunshade policy. This has been, we were supposed to do some sort of review or stock take of that, and being that skin cancers is the highest in New Zealand, doing something about that. And also the Live-In Town Centre strategy, the date not specified, I mean that's David's, but I thought it was 2018 when we first drafted that. The information management, noting that that's grey and internal, I do have a question around the archiving and accuracy of data, i.e. cemetery plots, given that we had a situation, and I'm interested in how those records are managed, or and not just that, but other things that have popped up over recent years, like records of encroachments, Tittle Road, and the challenge we had there. I guess it's just highlighting for me that, you know, the documents are produced and put before us, and we're like, oh, okay, we should have had that on file, but we don't, or we can't find it. And I'm just, wondering about that. And when might we get a update on that's all sorted now? Plots are good. The other thing is there's a few in the tables that were, well, they're decades old, like 2013, 2014. I wondered, is that best practice? Is it, there's a range of reasons why, like something's not a priority, but generally we review sort of in a 3 to 6 year cycle, depending on what it is. Some we even do annually, but is 10 years, that's so. I just wondered, now that we've done this, now we can reset, and that's are we expected to see that ongoing, or that's is that normal? I guess I'm asking. And lastly, the shared pathways strategy. It mentions in the comments that it could be replaced by the HITs. I kind of, though we haven't had an in-depth discussion, my sense is that we want to do more of that, but we want to take a district-wide approach, look across all that's existing, connect the dots, prioritise, make sure it's happening all over, not just in one place. And we weren't, there's obviously got to be or are we going to invest in dedicated cycleways? Sometimes we can't have everything, so I'm very keen to see that progress or a review sooner rather than later. I don't know how others feel, but those are all my feedback.
Sorry. Well, mine is two separate issues, so I don't know whether we want to maybe discuss this first. Yeah. So I'll just wait until the discussion of Councillor Piri-Hira's topics.
So look, a couple of things just to pick up on. One, this was, at this point, what the team have done is what we call a stock take review. We've simply gone and tried to get our hands on all those documents that exist within the organisation, confirm when they were last adopted or last reviewed, and which ones of those had specific timeframes associated with them around that maybe the signal order review or had a sort of a statutory timeframe for a review, and then have looked to do this exercise here, which has been around a prioritisation, some of which is based on timing, some of which is based on, I guess, previous direction or indications from council that this is something that's important or needs to happen. You're right, things like bylaws do have timeframes associated with them around how often they're reviewed. There's other things like some of those policies and strategies which are at the desire of the council, and some of that will be driven by context and change. So, for instance, we do a growth strategy. It might be that our growth remains constant, doesn't change much, and that strategy has a lifetime of sort of works for 5 years or something. Our growth context could change dramatically one way or the other, and it might be appropriate to do that sooner. So there are some things which I don't think it is a one-size-fits-all. There'll definitely be, we'll do everything within a 3-year or 6-year or a 10-year. Admittedly, those ones which do have sort of statutory timeframes associated with them, we do want to get onto that, catch up and get onto the cycle where those are then being done on that timeframe. I've made a few notes here. A couple of one that I could speak to. Lone Town Centre, you're right, that was adopted in 2018. What we'd signalled is doing a refresh of that currently, and what that's really just waiting for me on is to finalise. We're just trying to get that timing right where some things have advanced enough from the implementation plan that we can then be overt about those and that refresh that comes out with that. So that's a matter of months as opposed to sort of any longer time frame, but just why it hasn't got a hard date on it just at the moment. And I'll probably just leave it there to allow conversation. There's obviously a range of things which we have noted down around that, and some of that is what we're trying to seek today is I guess around the table. I'll use the heritage strategy as an example. Go back to 2012, 2013 when we prepared that. There was quite an interest in heritage. We were obviously looking at having a strategy to guide decisions that informed the district plan review at the time. We went so far as to have like a heritage grant process. Councils of the time since then have obviously made decisions where that wasn't a priority, wasn't seemed important, or wasn't important. Budgets cut, and obviously that has taken a very much back seat. And at this stage, I haven't probably heard from this council that is a priority yet to sort of re-merge. But not to say it isn't. But that's one we've signalled. Yes, it hasn't been reviewed for some time. I'd argue it isn't current because we've taken away some of the supporting funding mechanisms that were intended to help that. And so really it sits there as, well, does this council view that as a priority along with all those other things, or where does it sit in that priority list, knowing that it is out of date?
So, look, two issues. The first one is regarding Foxton Futures, which is a work in progress, as we understand. One of the imperatives around that is to explore the possibility of a community plan which embraces both the beach and the township. Simultaneously, I note that the 3-yearly review of the Foxton Beach plan is due literally 2 days from now, if we're going to take it literally. So I just wonder, David, if there's the opportunity to connect with the beach progressive people to talk about their willingness to engage as an organisation in Foxton Futures. To be honest, I think it's a fairly moribund organisation at the moment, but I do note in the report to the Community Board on Monday that they are looking to submit to the long-term plan, so there may be a glimmer of hope there, but it's about lining the ducks up and making sure that they are, as an organisation, part of Foxton Futures. Anything you wanted to comment on that, or does that make sense? Oh, good. That's it. And the second thing is, and there's an invitation here to give feedback about whether there's any desire from this council, this triennium, to revisit the heritage strategy, which, as is noted in the report, was something that there was little appetite for in the last triennium. But I, for one, would like to signal that it'd be worth bringing a paper to see if we can reinvigorate that. And it's driven particularly but not necessarily exclusively by an uplift in enthusiasm in Foxton, driven by the courthouse through the Better Off funding. But I think within that seed there's quite a desire to explore the heritage strategy and how it might affect Foxton, which has those strong heritage values as we know in its main street. So again, whether we want a signal from the table at this stage as to whether there's support for that coming for debate or not is over to you, Bernie, how we want to progress that, whether we want to signal support for a report or not, I don't know.
I've been reluctant to get that out of the way at the moment. It might be a much still in the discussion. Yeah, absolutely.
A question around the public places bylaw. So that's the review to begin in July 2024, specifically looking at the beach access question, and hopefully that is in penciled in. Do we know any, or if you can't give me the answer, but if you have an email, what the time frame would be of that review and when we could expect perhaps an operational outcome from that review? So, yeah, thank you.
By the middle of this year, we'd anticipate that it would be operational by the end of the year. And just to your earlier points, Councillor Tukapora, about the sunshade policy and the outcomes from the freedom camping policy into the public places bylaw. Obviously today's talking about the prioritisation, but absolutely, if council want to consider other policy elements when we review that stuff, that's one of your 5 jobs you get to do is set policy. So the policy settings need to become far more. I think our job is to make sure that we give it sharper focus for you as elected members to guide us. So yeah, absolutely to those questions, Parihira.
Thanks, guys. There's a couple from me. I couldn't find reference to the Coastal Reserves Plan, which is quite often referenced at Save Our River Trust, Foxton Futures, and the Manawatu Estuary Management Group. So I don't see that policy in there, so I am interested where it is. Just picking up on Pirihira's point around vaping and smoke-free. This morning the government did announce they want to repeal 3 sections of the legislation around smoke-free, which are probably going to have direct impacts on us in any policy direction we set. I think I'm going to raise the heritage strategy again, and probably endorse what Deputy Mayor Allen's raised around the significance of a lot of sites around the district, specifically Foxton, that are being highly identified right now. And so I do wonder about a reinvigoration of that status, but it needs, and as I said earlier, it only incorporates European heritage sites, and so there's some wording that's required, I feel, in that policy to capture the wider heritage of our district. There's nothing in here about natural landscapes and features in terms of a policy, and I think that's important that this council should have a policy as such, because as we've heard this morning, we're going into potential mapping, regional mapping projects, MPS stuff, exemption stuff, and I actually think that if we had a policy, it could align to the work that's actually going on in that space, and it might start our community thinking about the use of our whenua out there, that it's not just the take, yet there is give when you're using land sites. And again, my probably parting comment is once it's gone, it's gone. You can't recapture a heritage site when you seek to destroy it or remove it. Kia ora.
Just to respond to the last bit around the natural features, outstanding natural landscapes, so that is part of the RMA framework and is currently addressed through the district plan. So those assessment processes, those are recognised and identified through the district plan at the moment. So if there was ones that aren't captured or felt need to be, or that was a piece of work that this council wanted to see reviewed, then it would be through the district plan, and a district plan change process would be the way to do that. And as I say, probably the RMA's probably still got a little bit of a life yet. Quite what form they will take and what sort of where they'll sit in a hierarchy when a new framework comes, I'm not too sure, but that's what we have at the moment, and that's the framework it's been prepared under.
I just got a question over the working with Māori policy. I know that's part of our LTP that's coming out, but that's not. Do we need something in there that's aligned to whatever the Māori engagement strategy is going to be? There's no listing of that on the table.
You had specifically excluded the long-term plan policies, hadn't you, Emma? Yeah. So the working with Māori policy is the Māori contribution to decision-making policy, which is a legislative requirement, but we're obviously done a light touch review until we do the Māori engagement framework. But yeah, you're just saying, can we make sure that's reflected in that document? Yeah, we can make sure that happens.
Thanks, team. Surprisingly, I don't have any comments about any specific item in this table, except I have to flag that I don't think that the heritage policy is a priority for us right now, so I wouldn't support that being on the agenda for 2024, certainly. But I just wanted to make a comment to you, Emma, that genuinely, this document is in my top 10 council ever produced documents, because it honestly has been it's really great to see, because it has such rich information, and I think it demonstrates actually how complex council's job is and how interconnected things are, how nuanced it is. So just a big thanks from me, really, really great information. I think it's going to be really useful for us as we also potentially review and revisit our top 10 priorities and the plan on the page, just around getting our head around how these things fit together, when things are going to land. So yeah, honestly, thank you very much. It's a great piece of work.
And just to reinforce Sam's point, I agree with everything he said, except his comments about the heritage strategy, where he seemed to be somewhat off the mark. But just to indicate that at no state, the only words I used were in this triennium. So two people have both said it's not a priority within the next few months. I never said it was. I'm saying that it'd be good in this triennium to revisit it. So I think that's a very humble ask, and I look forward to support.
And just to not responding to the comments about the historical strategy, but to pick up on kind of a bit of the theme, might not seem like much for us to have a document that actually lists all our policies and our strategies and our plans, but poor Emma has had to go through a whole lot of records to find this, because it's not been as tidy as it should have been. And yes, we've not been regularly reviewing some policies as much as we should have, but now's the opportunity to reset that and, really put that focus back on the idea of a governance policy manual that guides your work program into the future. I think one of the next steps in this, other than obviously reviewing the policies and the bylaws, but if we remind ourselves about Justin often is like, what's the picture? Like he wants to see how does it fit pictorially, and so for our community to see how it fits pictorially, where the strategy aligns to the plan, to the policy. So we'll work on a picture one day soon. Another jigsaw puzzle.
As a next step, do you think for the hearings committee we can actually see for the next 12 or remainder of the term even which bylaws we'll be doing over the next few months? It's good to have like that ahead and know what's coming. I've not had that before. It would be great.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Caro. You've set the bar high, Emma. I think maybe, but endorse those comments made by Sam. It was good. Very good. Thank you. We can have just 2 minutes while we close off public view and before Kaingora get in the door.